Nigel Farage just released a top secret memo stating why his bank accounts in the UK were closed and why he took it personally. But today I'm going to tell you what I believe is missing in the Nigel Farage bank account closing story. So a number of weeks ago, Nigel Farage announced that he got a letter from his bank saying, we can't have you as a customer anymore. It's a commercial decision. We're going to close your account. He said he was offered an account at another bank within that banking group, and he didn't want it. He went and called other banks and said, hey, can I bank with you? They all said no. Ultimately, the bank he was with announced themselves. It was Coutts Bank, the longtime bank to the royal family. They had leaked to the BBC, hey, Nigel doesn't have enough money in his account. But it turns out through this new secret memo that Nigel got his hands on, that actually wasn't the case. That the bank had been saying, we wanted to close Nigel Farage's accounts for years. This, in my opinion, has some chilling effects on how banks control your money and why the missing piece is so important. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Nigel Farage went on YouTube and said his account was commercially viable. He claims that the bank admitted that to him.
So I put in what's called a subject access request to Coutts, the bank, who decided they wanted to close me out. I wanted to find out why. What was the reasoning? Well, here's the document. It is an incredible 40 pages. It reads rather like a brief.
But he got his hands on a 40-some page memo. I think it was a 42-page memo from the bank's Wealth Commission. Lots of commissions in these very corporate institutions. He said Brexit was mentioned 30 times. He is Mr. Brexit. Russia was mentioned 22 times. He claims that his connections to Russia have been disproved, and he claims that someone else who was tied with him to that actually won a case in court disproving that. That's what he says. He says Donald Trump was mentioned 14 times. He is friends with Donald Trump. Racist was mentioned 9 times. And the issue that we discussed before became a big issue, and then it later became talked about more and more, politically exposed person, a PEP. That was only mentioned 5 times. That was the thing that came to my mind is, does the bank just not want to deal with people who are politically exposed? Banks, have a lot of politically exposed clients, but they're more careful about it, right? There was a big story in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, and the city manager got sanctioned by the U.S. and no bank in Hong Kong wanted her, and she was literally keeping cash in her apartment. But what's very interesting about this, Nigel Farage says, and I would agree with him on this, what is a memo about having a customer of a bank which is supposed to be profitable, a bank which he points out is part owned by the British government? What does anything about him being friends with Donald Trump have to do with anything? Racism? Not a good thing. He would certainly say, hey, I'm not a racist. People can debate that about anybody, I suppose. What is that, an issue? Certainly there are many people who are racist, who have bank accounts at banks all over the world. What it sounds like to me is Nigel Farage upset this banking group, which he points out, again, was bailed out by the British government. Now they will say, hey, he's no longer part of the government, and so therefore, what is that related? But you would think that if your tax dollars had gone to support a bank, that maybe they would just, run the bank in an orderly way. I mean, one of the things you see people like Bernie Sanders talk about in the U.S. when he advocates for a postal bank, the post office offers banking systems to those who are unbanked, is, we need to accept anyone who needs a bank account. And you would think with that kind of methodology from more leftist figures in government and from their friends in the banking system that, hey, what does it matter if you are friends with Donald Trump in that situation, right? Now, if Donald Trump is sending you money and the bank wants to ask the source of funds of that, the bank wants to ask questions about that they certainly do that in the UK. They certainly do that in banks all around the world. They can do that. And hey, why are you getting money from Donald Trump? But what does a friendship with Donald Trump have to do with anything? Again, when a bank can scrutinize any transaction that comes in it that it thinks has any ties to politics around the world. Quite frankly, I think anyone who speaks out of this stuff takes some kind of risk. I do that to share this message with you. Now, I don't think that I certainly have the exposure of Nigel Farage. I really don't have many problems. Any problems that I've had have basically been tied to, jurisdictions where it's just like, or specific banks where we just don't want your account anymore. I've talked about HSBC Hong Kong. Pretty much every non-resident Hong Kong company, for the most part, had their accounts closed by HSBC many years ago. HSBC did exactly what, well, they did worse than what this bank is doing, but they just kind of like, declining a transaction here and there. Then it's like, all right, we're going to suspend your account. And they send these documents. And the goal essentially was admitted, like, we just want to close everyone's accounts. And you thought the war on cash existed everywhere. No, you go to the basement of a bank in Hong Kong, and people were living with backpacks full of cash. Like, here's 300,000 Hong Kong dollars. Here you go. Take it. Get out of here. And so the idea being, though, that Western banks have worse service. I mean, HSBC is just in its own level of being terrible. But, generally Western banks, the service is not as good. I have some good banks in the West with very nice people. But I think that, wealth havens in transactional, pragmatic countries are better places to bank because you avoid this kind of stuff. Certainly my opinions are perhaps out of the mainstream. I acknowledge that 99% of people or more are never going to leave their country, whether it's to save taxes or find prettier girls to date or whatever else reasons people might move. Certainly not everyone agrees with me that their country is becoming more and more authoritarian, that their economic freedom is being reduced. The statistics bear that out, but the average person doesn't think that. I think that most of what we talk about here can be backed up by statistics. But you know what? Some people don't like it. Should I be cut out of the system? I think a lot of people are increasingly saying, I don't agree with what most of the people in my country think. And to me, that's the first step to saying, I should be moving and diversifying my assets. Nigel Farage, and we reached out to him. I won't say any more than that, but he did speak at Nomad Capitalist Live, our annual live event. It's an event that I think anyone should attend, by the way, if you're trying to understand more about how to get bank accounts, how to diversify. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com/live, and we have great speakers this and every year, and we'll be talking about how do you get an offshore bank account? How do you diversify? What are all the things involved? Because it's more than just walking into a bank. Nigel Farage saw that firsthand. You don't just walk into the bank and they give you an account in your own country anymore, let alone in a foreign country. There's more to it than that. But one of the things that was written in the memo to Nigel Farage, to me, sums it up. Comments contrary to the bank's values cannot be tolerated. And so what someone said to that was, wrong think is now a term and condition. If you do not agree with your banker, they're not going to give you banking services. Banking is really more of a utility. It's one thing to say, listen, if you come to Nomad Capitalist and you come on an onboarding call and you start screaming and yelling and shouting profanities at the salesperson, yeah, we're probably not going to take your business. We're probably going to add you to our list of people we never want to do business with. We are not a utility. A bank is something, people need banking. If I wish to hire Nigel Farage to speak at my event and I need to pay for his flight, I have to pay him somehow. Now, I can pay a speaker's agency, but they have to pay him somehow. The guy doesn't want to keep cash in his apartment. But my thought here, and what I told you before this Nigel Farage issue is, there are countries that are, I love this phrase from The Economist recently, we're going to talk more about this in the coming month or so, that are pragmatic and transactional. That, to me, is what a banking relationship should be. It's pragmatic. We may not entirely agree with you. And it's transactional. Our goal is to take deposits from you, give you loans, whatever the case may be, and make money off of you. That's no longer the case in the Western banks. Now, you will see this, and some people will say, well, there's nowhere to go, screw the banks. Banks are bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are no fun. But transactional and pragmatic countries often breed transactional and pragmatic banks. I'm not saying that a bank in Singapore is just going to onboard everybody without checking stuff. But I can tell you, there are countries where Nigel Farage can go, and they're going to be much more open to him. When people say, don't keep your money in the bank because they'll freeze it during a truckers' protest or during whatever else where the government doesn't agree with you. Yeah, if you live in Canada, you should legally, and there may be forms to file, there may be things you have to do. I always suggest you do it legally. It's one thing we connect. Everyone who works with us, you get connected with tax people, and they make sure you're squared away. But if you're in Canada and you're protesting in Canada, the bank in Switzerland may not care. So you want to have some diversification. Live in one place, bank in another. Not because it's an invitation to doing stuff that's untoward, but let's take Nigel Farage's case. He was involved in Brexit. We all know that. The Russia stuff, he says, was disproven. Donald Trump, so what? Donald Trump was the president of the United States. Okay, now he's under indictment? This memo really predated all that. What does this matter? He's a racist? Quite frankly, go to some parts of the world. A lot of people, I'm sure there's plenty of people with bank accounts in London from other countries where in that country they will admit to being racist. I stayed at a hotel once in China and someone said, that's kind of racist what you did. The guy's like, yeah, so what? We're racist. But that was his personal opinion. Maybe a guy like that has a bank account at this fancy London bank that serves the king. Are they going to close his account down? By the way, I'll tell you, I was talking to someone who is the promoter, and they had an investment fund for one of the golden visa programs in Europe. I talked to them. They said, you may not be the perfect fit. You have too many citizenships. I said, wait a second. Aren't all your clients Chinese people? Many of whom are probably not paying their taxes. That's kind of the de rigueur standard in China. He says, yes, but we expect people from certain countries to not pay their taxes. But wait a second. It says right here, to be to be an applicant for this program, you need to be fully legal. Having multiple citizenship is fully legal. Not paying your taxes isn't. Well, whatever. We see it a little bit differently. That is the standard in some of those Western countries. Who cares if they're not paying their taxes over there? Doesn't bother us. Now, you can flip that on its head, right? The bank in the UK, the US, wherever, they don't like your political views? Go. Good. Go and bank somewhere else. Either they love your political views. There are some countries, oh, thank goodness. Oh, yeah, we love Brexit. Best thing ever. Please come right in. Or they're agnostic. And this framework from The Economist, transactional and pragmatic, is one you can apply. If you're living in a country where they're doing this to people, please do not think it's happening everywhere. 45% of the world's population, according to The Economist, lives in a country where geopolitically and somewhat financially, transactional and pragmatic. That's a lot of places where you can go and store your money. You're not going to run a drug cartel through their banks. They're not going to let you do that. But they're not going to sit around and say, are you a racist?
I will not get a UK bank account. That is done, dusted, over. Mercifully, in the modern world, there are fintech solutions where I can receive and pay money.
So, Nigel Farage says he will not get a UK bank account. Plenty of countries where he could. I disagree that one should only use a fintech, which is like a bank through an app. You're not going to, as he says, you're not going to have totally full-featured stuff. But the world of banking in the West is getting worse with them starting to check your social media. Wrong think is now a T&C, says one of the commenters. The solution is banking somewhere else. Nomad Capitalist helps people open bank accounts around the world and all the incumbent services one might want to protect themselves from some of this madness. I would suggest that to Nigel Farage to consider that, and I would certainly suggest it to you as well.